Give me the details of exactly what happened up there.
As a neat detail, out of all the kids, Vander specifically takes Clagger along for a stroll through the lanes. He knows his kids well. He knows Clagger is the only one who's gonna give him a 100% accurate recounting of the events. Nothing added, nothing left out, no ego or insecurities to get in the way. Clagger is the most emotionally mature of the four, and his only priority is to be there for his family. Vander is being an intelligent parent. I can appreciate that. Subtle things like this are easily ignored, but they add to characterization all the same. It makes the interactions and dynamics between the cast that bit more three-dimensional. Or not. Perhaps the writers intended none of that. It could just as easily be the simple fact that Milo, Powder and Vi are all needed back at home for the following scene, and so Clagger is the only option left. Purely a case of functionality. See, what I did there was Inference. Keep that in mind for later. So Vander and Clagger visit a local knick-knack shop, run by Vander's trusted business partner / confidant Benzo.
We're closed. We'll open up.
For good. You can take your worthless junk elsewhere.
Just as well. Owner's the shittiest businessman I know.
We also finally get introduced to the much spoken about little man Echo.
Finish it later. Vander and I need a word.
But...
Oh, no, off you go.
Clagger!
Hey, little man.
Did you fight the enforcers?
What? Oh, no. Just some bums.
Oh, did Vi kick their asses?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't be here otherwise.
Oh, she showed me a couple of moves to practice. Look!
Yeah, it's coming along.
Echo is a chipper stripling, wide-eyed, admiring the older kids and their rebellious escapades, especially Vi, because punching stuff is cool. He's also a criminal mastermind in the making.
Hey, so how'd you find that place anyway?
This weirdo came into the shop, bought a whole bunch of stuff Benzo only keeps there for display. He paid in gold and didn't even haggle. I charged him double price.
Diabolical. On the flip side of the scene, Vander and Benzo have a heart-to-heart about the recent happenings.
How could they be so stupid?
The younger folk think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and Vi's one of them. Throws herself at trouble wherever she can find some.
Yeah, they're growing up, Vander. Looking to write their own stories. You can't protect them forever.
Importantly, Vander isn't only concerned about the obvious conflict, the police coming after his kids. Rather, the incident with Blondie and his goons has Vander feeling something wicked in the air.
Someone was following them.
Whole lot of someones from what I heard.
Not enforcers. Someone on our side.
Who?
There's worse things than enforcers out there. We both know that.
Foreshadowing. In the meantime, the enforcers arrive, demanding Vander to hand over the criminals. And it's almost comical. Using basic police procedure, hearing from witnesses, the officers arrive straight to the source, to Vander, the de facto leader of the Undercity. Chief Grayson here knows Vander personally. They are both the unofficial brokers of peace between the two cities. They have an understanding. Vander keeps his people in line, and Grayson keeps her officers from hassling them. The Undercity is free to have their own economy and shady dealings under the table, unmolested by pesky things like laws and regulations. It's a fragile peace, live and let live. Given this close relationship between these two, there is no way that Grayson doesn't know that Vander harbors 4 adoptive children. Kinda like the 4 kids they are looking for. Grayson cannot be both competent and incompetent at her job at the same time, so it's utterly baffling that the conversation doesn't immediately go to, listen, I know it was your kids, you know I know it was your kids, don't insult my intelligence, let's just get this over with.
We're looking for the culprits.
Got a description?
Yeah, it's exactly who you're picturing in that
thick head of yours.
You think my head is thick?
Just past the average.
Listen, you shady
How
son.
about you go for a little walk, Marcus? Cool off a bit.
Yeah, Marcus, piss off. You are making too much sense. That scene is thoroughly ridiculous. The event itself and the aftermath. We are stuck with it. No one knows who did the deed half the city saw them do. It's an utter mystery. This is the narrative the show is going with. Moving on. Despite getting a relatively small snippet of screen time, Grayson ends up being extremely likable. She comes to each encounter with empathy, yet retains a firm grasp on the reality of things, and never allows her own feelings stand in the way of her duty. She is in many ways the ideal officer of law.
Give me a name. We'll do things quiet. No one will know you were involved.
I can't do that.
You don't seem to grasp how serious this is. If I don't put someone behind bars tonight, the next time I come down here, I'll have an army of enforcers with me. We both know how that'll go.
This little chat is basically an act of courtesy towards Vander. Grayson respects him. He is a good man. She knows that things are better with him in charge. She is giving Vander the chance to settle things quietly and peacefully before the incident spirals out of control. Both of them are veterans in this useless conflict, and both of them are tired. They both want the same thing, to uphold peace, no matter how flimsy, because the alternative will lead to nothing but useless loss of life, and more hate, and history repeating itself. Of course, Vander won't give up the people he cares for, even when everything he's been working for is at stake. As a final pleading act of respect, Grayson gives him time to think it over.
If you change your mind, this will reach me. And only me.
She won't bring down the full fury of the topside just yet. She'll play for time as long as she can, hoping that Vander makes the right decision for the unified dream between these veterans. She is quite the awesome lady. As a contrast to Grayson and the compassion she embodies, her assisting officer Marcus is the polar opposite, the bad cop to her good cop. Aside from the sense of duty and loyalty to Piltover they both share, their ideals couldn't be further apart. Marcus's actions are solely driven by his vehement disgust towards the Undercity and the lowlives who populate it. He doesn't differentiate between hardened criminals, actors of circumstance, and innocents. To him, everyone living in the Undercity is scum, and the incident today has only reinforced that worldview. He is young, passionate, blinded by anger, lacks nuance, and has a skewed single-minded understanding of justice. So at this point in time, he is the exact same as Vi, just from across the river. It's not any kind of hidden detail, the show itself points that out.
Don't mind the kid. Doesn't know when to pipe down.
Some things are the same topside and bottom.
This here is one of the biggest wasted opportunities of the show, because unlike Grayson and Vander, we never get a proper conversation between Marcus and Vi. It wouldn't need to be a civil sit-down or anything. The two of them screaming at each other about their perception of justice would do just fine. I think it would be interesting. We might learn how Marcus came to think the way he does, what event shaped him. Despite his firm beliefs, we know next to nothing about his past. Unlike with Vi, here we have a clear cause and effect for why she is so angry and out to punch the entire world in the face. For Marcus, we really get nothing. He believes what he believes, because that's his character. Marcus and Vi do share scenes, their paths are closely intertwined, and yet the show never has them fully interact and change ideas. The missed potential for characterization is one thing, but there is another even greater topic that would have been easy to explore by having these two talk even once. That being the history of this conflict, which is woefully underdeveloped. Going past the opening scene, further back in time, we know barely anything about the events that led to the incident on the bridge. What is the genesis of the hate? How did all of this come to be? We never get a flashback to the olden times, nor does anyone give a full recounting of the history. All the information the show gives is delivered vaguely at best, and by an unreliable narrator. The closest context we get comes fairly late in the show, and I'm just gonna play it in full.
What's that?
You don't recognize it? Have you forgotten where we came from? The mines they had us in? Air so thick it clogged your throat. Stuck in your eyes.
That's it?
So there was some kind of mining operation in the Undercity. What did they mine? We don't know. Is the mining still happening? We don't know. Did someone force the workers down there in chains? At gunpoint? We don't know. If the work was voluntary, who were the bunch of idiots who originally accepted the horrific working conditions? How much did they get paid? What is the taxation policy in Piltover? Do the people get pensions? We don't know. Even this anecdotal crumb of history is worded by the literal villain of the show in a dramatic tone to bolster his own position. No factual information on screen. And as for the clash at the bridge itself, what exactly caused it? What was the thing that broke the camel's back? We don't know. Did it start as a peaceful protest? Was it a full-on riot? Was it a revolution? What was the plan exactly? Walk across the bridge? And then what? Hang around aggressively until the opposition submits to whatever it was that you demand? We know nothing. Details like these matter because the actual factual context is what determines the level of justifiable actions. Was lethal force justified? Gleeful execution of downed opponents is pure evil, no disputing that, but the larger context is still left hazy. If the people of the Undercity came bearing arms, ready to crack heads, then the enforcers were returning fire with fire. This guy will eat all his remaining meals with a straw, provided that his neck didn't just snap. It is important to understand this, ignoring all outside information, setting aside our biases, everything we know about politics in our world, or rather what we think we know, there is barely any factual information to grasp in the show itself. The historical conflict that acts as the backdrop for this story is left extremely blurred. There is no clear good faction and bad faction. Mistakes were made on both sides. Possibly. See, there is this thing we do all the time when consuming stories. We gather bits of information that the author gives us about the characters and the world, and we combine those pieces to draw conclusions, so that we may fill the gaps in the narrative, because no story can literally show us every second that happens, reveal all the inner thoughts of every single character from all perspectives, in full, including the entirety of history all the way back to the birth of the universe. The audience has to do some of the work. They have to engage with the story. This is called inference. It happens naturally. Most of the time we don't even actively think about it. However, it's crucial to separate reasonable inference from inventing stuff for the writer. If there is no information given, then we cannot infer anything. Many times people bring in their own biases into the fiction they consume, imagine a story they wish to see, and imprint that onto the text, and then pretend like that's the story the author wrote. At that point, they are no longer inferring, they are writing fanfiction in their head. They create a subjective split timeline from the original work, and insist that's the story being told. As a common example, This is how every single shipping war starts. People pretend that the story includes information that was never there, and then willfully misinterpret everything to suit their bias. I myself am mostly interested in what is actually shown on screen. That's what I base my analysis on. If there's no information given, then I have nothing to work with. I refuse to write the story on behalf of the writers. The way I laid this out may sound like criticism towards the show, but it is not. It's just a statement of reality. The fact that the history of conflict between Piltover and the Undercity is left vague is perfectly fine. That's just the story we are presented with. The lacking context leaves the conflict grey. Like I mentioned before, this is a story of individuals navigating through life, making choices according to their own desires. There's no overarching victim or bad guy as far as this historical conflict is concerned. I can't say whether or not the authors intended it to be like this, but that is what ends up happening on screen. And far as I see it, whenever the show wishes to be 100% clear about something, they are very explicit.
I charged him double price. Sucker.
But how did you know where he lived?
Followed him? How else?
Oh, right.
I personally would like to know more, because I am genuinely interested to learn how this world functions. Yes, even about all the taxation stuff. But the lack of information in itself is not a negative. Whatever information the author puts on screen builds up the story, and as more and more info gets added to that, the story grows and gains complexity and flavor. But it's also essential to notice the utility of withholding answers. Just like clear info steers our perception of the content, the lack of info has the power to do the exact same. And as always, a massive thanks to each of you for sticking around for this long. And a special thanks to all the supporters on Patreon, as well as an extra special thanks to my 10-euro supporters, Wyland, Jesiah Vanderwatt, 6 stars, and Danny Kicks. If you would like to join these fine people, or check out any of my other creative stuff, all the links are down below. Take care everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one.